At first, there was only a handful. Today, there are thousands. Just 40 years after their first foray into the Chesapeake Bay, more than 3,500 mute swans now live here year-round.
Did you see them every day?
Almost every day.
Almost every day?
To Patrick Hornberger, that's great. A pair of swans has become a regular fixture in the cove behind his house.
But they are wonderful to look at, peaceful. They add sort of something to your terrain here.
Marcel and Proust, as Hornberger calls them, show up every day. But they're just two of many mute swans that ply these shallow waters. So Patrick and I hop aboard his small boat and venture off in search of more swans.
Yeah. Let's see, I don't know what you see.
Several pairs nest and raise offspring in this part of the bay. With their long necks and snowy white feathers, they are striking. To Patrick, they're like a work of art.
Aesthetically, you'd be hard-pressed to find a prettier bird. In fact, if you didn't agree that that wasn't one of nature's greatest achievements, you wouldn't appreciate a Van Gogh painting, would you, either?
But in another part of the bay, there's another pair of boaters also looking for mute swans. Their intentions, though, are far different.
He's making himself look bigger than he actually is. That's an aggressive posture.
Drew Costco and John Flood work for Maryland's Department of Natural Resources. They're searching for nests in order to do some population control.
Here, I'll get on the other side.
It's a bit unpleasant, but these guys insist it's got to be done. It's called addling.
We slurp the eggs like this to tear the tissue inside, and that makes sure that the bird isn't going to survive. When it sounds like a milkshake, you've got an addled egg.
To make doubly sure the eggs won't bear swans, Drew and John coat the shells with vegetable oil.
The oil coats the membrane of the shell and prevents gas exchange, therefore will suffocate the embryos and prevent them from hatching.
To the state of Maryland, mute swans are exotic troublemakers, outsiders helping themselves to the bay's resources. In this case, millions of pounds of submerged aquatic vegetation, seagrass that fish, crabs, and other waterfowl need to survive. Wildlife manager Larry Heineman has to consider their needs.
The abundance of bay grasses has declined, and the mute swans feed exclusively on grasses. It is one additional pressure on a resource that's limited.
Then there are the seasonal conflicts with other birds, ducks, geese, and most notably, other swans.
These mute swans look like they would be gentle creatures, but they're actually very territorial and they can be quite aggressive. In fact, folks at Maryland's Department of Natural Resources say the mute swans are actually scaring off the native swans.
Tundra swans nest in Alaska and Canada, but spend the winter here in the mid-Atlantic. Their numbers have dropped by some 30% since the 1970s. Officials believe it's in part because of competition with mute swans.
If we were to allow this population to increase and continue to expand its range, those types of problems would become worse.
So, authorities recently got permission to start shooting mute swans. They targeted 1,500, but only killed about 100 birds before lawsuits forced them to stop. I caught up with Mike Markarian, the head of the Fund for Animals, one of the groups that sued Maryland to protect the swans.
The state of Maryland, unfortunately, has this religious fervor where it wants to eliminate any species that's not native, regardless of whether they're causing any conflicts.
Is going out and shooting swans cruel?
Shooting these birds is excessively cruel, especially when there's no justification for it.
But now, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service plans to allow Maryland and 9 other states to start slaughtering swans again. The agency could issue the required permits as soon as August. Of course, the cries of protest are already being heard, especially from people like Maxine Ritter.
You see, they don't make any noise. They just float around. They don't do anything bad. Good boy. God's creatures. How can you fuss with God's creatures?
For centuries, these creatures were cherished as symbols of purity and elegance. That was in Europe. Here in the U.S., it's not at all clear whether the mute swan will ever be welcome. There's something strange and wonderful about seeing a ship slicing through the jungle along this narrow ribbon of water. It's a scene that's repeated dozens of times a day. In fact, for almost 90 years, the Panama Canal has been a path between the seas for hundreds of thousands of vessels, each carrying a unique story. My own Panama Canal saga begins at dawn at the Pedro Miguel Boat Club.
May I come aboard? They've already got me walking the plank here.
Ward and Audrey Morgan are sailing from San Francisco to Boston.
Nice to meet you, Peter. I'm Ward Morgan.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for
having me. This is my wife, Audrey.
Hi, Audrey. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
For the last 20 years, this ship has been their home, and a passage through the canal, a dream.
Are you looking forward to it?
Oh, yeah.
It feels pretty good. I think I told you earlier, we started this boat in '80, and it's taken a long time to make it seaworthy. So this has been a long time getting here. This is a big thing for us.
Joining us on board, a dozen of the Morgans' friends who'll work as deckhands, and a Panamanian advisor who'll help Captain Morgan navigate the canal.
If I pull her down fast, she'll start to walk. So.
The Panama Canal is open to everybody. It's a neutral passage for everybody. You can come with warships, passenger ships, sail ships, whatever can pass through the canal.
The canal is some 50 miles long, running northwest to southeast across the narrowest section of the Panamanian Isthmus. It took 10 years and 70,000 people to build it. It cost $400 million and the lives of more than 5,000 workers. It was inaugurated in 1914, signaling the start of a new era in interoceanic travel. Carlos Belize is with the Canal Authority.
If the vessel does not take the Panama Canal route and go through the Cape Horn to the tip of South America, it will sail an additional 8,000 miles. We are a shortcut.
Remarkably, the canal operates today much the way it always has, relying on a series of locks to get ships safely and relatively quickly from one ocean to another.
The canal's 3 locks act sort of like water elevators. Depending on which way you're going, they'll either lift your ship up about 85 feet above sea level so you can get across the Continental Divide, and then once you're on the other side of the isthmus, very gradually they'll lower your ship back down to sea level and let you go on your way.
During lockages, these massive gates seal the chamber, allowing gravity to drain the water from the higher to the lower. No big deal for giants like this car carrier, they barely budge, but it's a bit nerve-wracking for smaller boats like ours.
Once you're in and the doors close, you're committed.
During the transit, ships use their own propulsion, but larger vessels are helped along by ultra-heavy locomotives that keep them on the straight and narrow with strong cables. It's a slow, repetitive process, and patience is essential. In time, we're cruising through the Gaylord Cut, the thinnest section of the canal. After 8 hours of slow going and creeping through 3 sets of locks, we're finally streaming toward the Caribbean, with salt air blowing in our faces. We're all thrilled and relieved to tie up at a pier in Cologne, our Panama Canal Transit behind us.
We made it.
Yay!
How do you feel?
I feel great.
It was uneventful.
Did you smell that salt air when we came down there?
Yeah.
Now you know how I feel.
Like so many mariners before them, they've gone from Pacific to Atlantic in less than a day. A remarkable achievement, really, made possible by a thin ribbon of water that has changed the globe like few other human accomplishments. Despite the name, Yucca Mountain is really just a long, flat ridge stretching across the Nevada desert. An unimpressive chunk of rock at the center of a heated debate over nuclear waste and where to store it. The Department of Energy says this is the place.
To me, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for me, it's the right thing to do for my kids, it's the right thing to do for America.
The federal government is turning Yucca Mountain into the nation's first centralized repository for nuclear waste, planning to store as much as 77,000 tons of radioactive material here, all tucked away in metal containers buried deep inside the ground. On a small train, we ride into the bowels of the mountain, 2 miles in, 800 feet down to the lowest point of the site.
First of all, let me welcome you guys to the repository level.
Pat Rowe from the Department of Energy is our guide. This is where they would store the waste.
We would build the surface facilities, primarily ones out here by the north portal. The waste would be brought down the tunnel we just came down and would come out, and then we'd have these series of emplacement drifts that would go across here.
The emplacement drifts would be small chambers like this one, where they'd stash the waste in corrosion-resistant containers, or waste packages as they're called. The packages are designed to work in concert with the natural environment to have extremely long lives. And of course, with nuclear waste, long life is what it's all about.
This tunnel that I'm in was finished in April of 1997, but the Department of Energy has been studying this site for decades. They've been taking a really hard look at Yucca Mountain's geological features, trying to answer basically one big question, and that is, can they safely store radioactive waste here, essentially for thousands of years?
The DOE says yes. Their engineers have been testing the suitability of this site, primarily the rock. Above all, it needs to be hard enough to prevent water from leaking in or out of the waste packages.
It's incredibly competent. There's very low moisture to involve in it, and all of our studies show that indeed this rock would be very much a good host.
Said it's not happening on his watch.
But not everyone agrees. Some experts say Yucca Mountain's geology is far from adequate. Steve Frischman's a geologist working for the state of Nevada, which strongly opposes the project.
And it's not a matter of if it will escape, it's a matter of when it will escape. The rock is very badly fractured, and the water travels quickly down through fractures.
What are the implications of that?
It's water that's going to eventually carry it to the environment.
Here in the desert, there isn't much rainfall, but the water that does make it into the ground flows south towards the Amargosa Valley, a small farming community of some 5,000 residents.
Obviously, we got Yucca Mountain right over here.
That's
behind us.
The ridge that runs across there.
How far away?
35, 40 miles from straight across desert.
Pretty close.
Yeah, very close. Too close for comfort.
Dave Hall manages the biggest dairy farm in the entire state. 8,000 cows milked and fed round the clock. They use a lot of water here, and the possibility of radioactive contamination is not sitting well with them.
Someday, the water that you're drawing up may be radioactive or contaminated?
That's a primary concern, because once it gets in the water table, you know, it's never ending. How do you get it back out? It just continues to flow.
Our first and foremost issue is health.
Many of Hall's neighbors agree. They're especially worried about nuclear waste being transported to Yucca Mountain.
If you want to attract somebody, give them a really high-level target, you get all this stuff in the news and get a terrorist interested, they may very well try something.
And don't forget, just 90 miles down the road is Las Vegas and its billion-dollar tourism industry. People there have the same concerns.
They're afraid of having waste coming through and being here. They're afraid of the traffic and the waste being on the roads. They're afraid for their property values.
America generates 2,000 tons of nuclear waste each year. Currently, it's stored above ground at separate facilities all across the country near millions of Americans, leading some people to see Yucca Mountain as a better alternative.
Do you see a benefit to having the project go through?
A benefit for the nation. And
for the nation?
And for the energy equation, which we must solve in this country.
So you're being very selfless and sort of looking at the big picture.
I guess you'd say that, yes. That'd be a fair statement.
Even if the project is approved, it'll be a long while before any waste is buried in the Nevada desert. But if that day does come, a lot of people say their lives and this landscape will change forever. Einar Karasson and his sister Andrea approach the beach on a mission of mercy. Inside their cardboard box, they have 2 orphans. Fledglings plucked from the streets of town, baby puffins. The youngsters are about to give the birds a new lease on life.
They don't survive if they stay in the town there, and where cats, dogs eat them, or they just die. It's really good to save them.
The children of Heme have been saving young puffins, called pufflings, for generations. In fact, at the end of the summer, releasing them by the hundreds to the safety of the sea has become a local tradition.
You have to save the birds. If you don't do it, they die. They find it very exciting.
Exciting, obviously, for the kids who get to throw live birds into the air and watch them fly away. But no doubt, it's a little bit nerve-wracking for the recently born pufflings.
The basic problem with these little guys is that supposedly when they get old enough, they're supposed to fly off of these cliffs here and head out to sea, but the lights of the town evidently get them confused, and so instead of flying off to sea, they actually fly into town where they crash land and sometimes end up on the streets. I know.
That's where the puffling patrols come in. Each night during the month of August, moms and dads lead troops of kids through town looking for wayward pufflings. They use flashlights to search the ground near buildings and streetlights. The pier is a particularly popular place.
Okay, guys, hey, look, it's there!
When a bird's spotted, the kids rush to scoop it up. And bring it in off the mean streets of Heme for the night. It's hard work.
When you were a boy, you did this.
Absolutely.
And what did you think when you were that young? Did you enjoy this?
Oh, yeah, this is our national sport.
It may be their national sport, but it's an adventure that has universal appeal. Around midnight, I find Americans Olaf Holm and his 6-year-old son Andrew scouring the docks for pufflings. Within a half hour, they have a bird in hand.
We came across the parking lot and I saw the silhouette of what looked like a little puffin. Sure enough, there he was, right in the middle of the parking lot. And we jumped out and we got him.
The following day, all the birds that landed in friendly hands are transported to the seashore, pointed in the right direction, and given their flying orders. The kids seem to be having a great time. So I decide it might be fun to get in on the action.
I'll go over there.
I find a pair of experts, 2 12-year-olds who claim to have a lifetime of experience handling pufflings.
When I was just one, I go with my mom and my brothers.
So have you kept count of how many pufflings you've released, or
no?
Too many?
Yes, too many.
So you guys are going to coach me through this? Yeah. My first opportunity releasing a puffling, and hopefully I won't hurt this poor guy?
First, the proper grip.
You hold them like that.
Okay, so I'm gonna hold them like a football.
Yeah. And then you just come up.
Then the right technique.
And do I have to throw him hard or just throw him very easy?
Just throw him.
You ready? Here you go, boy.
With his wings free and flapping, the idea is to cock your arm like a quarterback and throw a short pass.
All right, here we go. Well, I thought he was going to make it, but he'll be okay from there, right? I don't know. I think my form was okay, but the bird didn't cooperate necessarily.
Whether they swim to safety like the unfortunate bird I helped, or fly off over the North Atlantic, you have to wonder what kind of impact all this has on the species as a whole. The largest colonies of puffins in the world are found right here in Iceland, 8 to 10 million of them. They're hardly endangered. Besides, apart from being a national symbol, they are also a national dish. Smoked or sautéed, you'll find puffin on a lot of dinner menus around here. I figured I'd give it a try.
And it's not bad. However, whoever told me it tasted like chicken was lying.
Anyway, I thought it a bit strange running around trying to save these creatures when ultimately they could end up as a main course. But according to Christian Egilson, a native who rehabilitates injured puffins, it's all perfectly normal.
Maybe for you, maybe for farmer people, this looks strange to eat so nice bird like puffin. But this we have done for hundreds of years.
Fortunately for the small, confused, and practically helpless pufflings, the annual search and rescue efforts are also tried and true. A custom passed from generation to generation, whether it's overhand or underhand, thanks to the strong arms and big hearts of the children. Stranded pufflings are getting a second chance. They're called the Rabugari Superstars, and it's easy to see why. They sing and dance with unrestrained passion. It's their way of sharing their culture with us.
In Uganda, we are rich in culture. We take you from Mbarara, we take you from Kisoro, Kabale, Mbarara, then the whole districts, by dancing, by showing the whole culture.
It's a cultural tour, but it's also a sign, a clear signal that this community is ready to welcome visitors. You see, there's a group of gorillas living in the forest near their town, and they hope tourists will soon be allowed into the park to visit them. Komakech Okiti is the park's tourism warden.
Well, now they have seen a lot of things, a lot of good things which can come out of gorilla tourism. The visitors come, some visitors go and pay there directly for food, accommodation, and water. That is a benefit to the local people. Then we have employment.
In fact, gorilla tourism is this region's new cash crop. It's changing not only the lives of Africans who live around Bwindi National Park, but the landscape of this country as well. Just look at Bahoma.
About 10 years ago, this community sort of didn't even exist, but then they created Bwindi as a national park, and eventually gorilla tourism started. And now Bahoma is a thriving community of about 20,000 people. A lot of the folks live here along the main road. A lot of them live up in the hills surrounding this area. We've been talking to people all week, and everybody seems to agree that gorilla tourism is a good thing.
Although Uganda is rich in natural resources, it remained one of the world's poorest and least developed countries until the 1990s. Political stability and economic reforms have turned things around, clearing the way for tourism and new opportunities. Doreen Akamparira runs a small shop in town.
What do you think about having tourists come to the park and come to Bahoma?
The good things for them.
It's good
Yeah.
for the tourists.
Yes.
But what about you?
The same to me. Of course,
Yeah.
it's benefiting to us.
Yeah. In what way?
Let's say like bringing for us money.
These days, tourism is the second largest source of revenue in Uganda, right behind agriculture. 75% of that money is being generated by adventurous people coming to see the gorillas.
It's a small park, 331 square kilometers.
Alfred Twinamujuni is a wildlife guide at the park.
Before this park was gazetted, people were depending on tea only as a source of income.
Tea?
Yeah, tea.
And that's it?
That's it. But now, many are depending on tourism now.
Mostly, they depend on tracking and park entrance fees. It's $250 or 435,000 Ugandan shillings to track gorillas for a day. A percentage of that revenue goes into the community's coffers, boosting incomes and funding projects like new schools. Richard Magazy is the chairman of the community council.
It's benefiting a lot of people. The income is a bit improved compared to the past before it was made a national park. People have employment, they have market for some produce, and women have started making handcrafts of which they can serve the tourists.
The average income in Uganda is only about $300 a year, so every little bit helps. And even small tourist-related ventures like the Bahoma Community Campground make a difference. The money visitors spend to stay in these small huts goes directly back into the community. The same money is helping to conserve the endangered mountain gorillas. They're under fire from hunters and poachers and threatened by destruction of their habitat.
Thank you.
Tourism makes the animals valuable resources
Thank you
and gives local people incentive to preserve them and their forests. Medad Tumugabirwe has been a gorilla guide here at the park since 1993.
The tourists are bringing money to the country, so the people who are benefiting from gorilla tourism, they also continue protecting them.
So you think it's helping the gorillas?
Yes.
And protecting them?
Sure.
Wedged between Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo, the gorillas live in a dangerous part of the world. When they're not dodging bullets, the primates are often competing with farmers for land.
You have some food for your lunch?
I do.
The influx of tourists helps ease some of that friction and provides essential funding for organizations that want to save the gorillas and the forests. This forest hosts a rich, vibrant, and diverse ecosystem. It's also one of the last refuges for the world's mountain gorillas. Keeping this natural treasure as it is crucial if the animals are to survive. As long as tourism continues to be managed carefully, the gorillas will continue to thrive. And local people, like the Rabugari superstars, will have reason to hope and real cause to kick up their heels and celebrate. Around the world, fish are disappearing, and commercial fisheries are collapsing.
We have reached a situation where the oceans have reached their maximal sustainable yields. In other words, the ocean cannot give anymore.
Yet the world's demand for fresh seafood continues to rise. The best way to close that gap could be aquaculture. It's an ancient practice, farming fish in controlled environments. Centuries ago in big ponds, recently in floating cages and nets. In both cases, it takes a lot of clean water to nourish the fish and carry away the waste. These fish farms often pollute, and escaping fish often mix with and weaken wild stocks. But at the center of marine biotechnology, researchers are solving those problems by producing fish in total containment. I'm struck by the center's location in a brand new building downtown in Baltimore's Inner Harbor.
Hello, hello. I'm Peter Standring.
Yoni Zohar.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having us.
Yonatan Zohar is a leading figure in aquaculture research and a specialist in fish reproduction.
This is where it's going on.
Absolutely. This is the answer. This is your next wave of aquaculture technologies.
It revolves around a collection of biosecure tanks that produce a steady stream of seafood.
Beautiful fish.
They're called gilt-head sea bream, a highly prized food fish that sells for about $10 a pound.
And this is not a fish that you would see anywhere in American waters, would you?
No, not whatsoever. It's the best fish that you can have.
It's a much sought-after delicacy, but because of overfishing, it's practically disappeared from the sea. That's not the case, though, here in the lab. There are hundreds of these fish living in these blue tanks. The scientists begin by turning ordinary tap water into simulated seawater. Fertilized eggs are introduced, and cared for properly, they gradually grow into adults. Their entire life cycle is enclosed.
They don't leave anything up to chance. The environments inside these tanks are all controlled by these computers. It takes care of pH level, CO2 level, oxygen levels. It controls the temperature of the water, the salinity of the water, everything.
Because it's all contained, the fish aren't exposed to any harmful toxins or pollutants as they are in the wild.
The fish are completely clean, and the fish that are produced here are very healthy and clean and can be marketed as very clean fish.
This is the key to the whole setup. It's what they call a biofilter, and without it, the fish that are living inside these tanks would be in big trouble.
The filters teem with microorganisms and bacteria that thrive on the waste generated by the fish. Bad water goes in, good water gets pumped back out into the tanks. Not a drop goes astray.
Without this, the marine environment that the fish are living in wouldn't be as clean or healthy.
Will become toxic, actually.
Be toxic.
So this is really the heart of the system.
As innovative as it is, it's a generic system that, with minor adjustments, can be tailored to suit just about any kind of fish.
This is the other species of fish they produce here. This big old guy is a striped bass. Check him out. Definitely the biggest fish I ever caught.
There are hundreds just as big swimming side by side. Yoni has worked out a way of manipulating their reproductive cycles. By tweaking their hormones, he gets them to produce eggs year-round instead of just once a year.
It's like OBGYN type of research, but on fish, and developing, fertility type of technologies to get them to reproduce in captivity, which was not the case before.
They've had similar success with the blue crab, a species rapidly vanishing from the nearby Chesapeake Bay.
So we have a blue crab in here.
They've got about 100 female crabs here that spawn on demand. Last year, they produced more than 40,000 blue crabs, which were tagged and introduced to the bay to bolster the crab's breeding stock. They seem to be adapting well to life outdoors, which is a good sign that this technology works. In fact, Yanni says it has great potential to relieve the stress that so many fisheries are under.
What you saw downstairs, I think, are some major breakthrough in terms of developing the next wave of aquaculture technologies.
This next wave appears to be effective and safe. It also promises to be profitable, whether it's set up in the desert, a small town, or in the inner city. With this type of aquaculture available, catching big fish will never be the same.